Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Mo Wright, Chair of the Board of Trustees for CMC, and President Rama. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon to our new home. Give it up for the Boathouse, our new home here for CMC. Today's forum is Crowdfunding, Boom or Bust. It's brought to us by Next Level Columbus, and our special shout out to Walker Evans, who I think I saw in the back, for helping us pull today's forum together. Let's thank them both for their support. Now, we've all heard about efforts of all sorts, from large business ventures to somebody wanting to fund grandma's potato salad recipe and get it into market. Crowdfunding has become a new way of thinking about how we make investments into things that are important to us. Today's forum will was first highlighted by a journalism article by Metropolitan, and Susan Post is here to talk a little bit about that and to moderate today's conversation. If crowdfunding is the next big thing, then there is much more to learn and discuss, and so I'm going to turn to our panel now and introduce them and then let the conversation proceed from there. Please welcome owner and operator of The Commissary, Kate Jupe, founder and Chief Creative Officer of Content Via, Ryan McManus, founder and CEO of Trident Design, Chris Hawker, and our host and moderator for today's conversation, a reporter with Metropreneur, Susan Post. Susan, the podium is yours.
Thanks, Mo. 2016 could be the year that crowdfunding surpasses venture capital. According to a report by Mass Solution, the relatively new industry was predicted to balloon to $34 billion in 2015. An article from Forbes states that on average, the venture capital industry invests $30 billion per year. Not all businesses are the scalable operation that typically attracts venture investment. Access to capital, from venture dollars to bank loans, is one of the biggest challenges a startup or small business faces. Enter crowdfunding. With well-known platforms Indiegogo and Kickstarter launching in 2008 and 2009 respectively, for over 7 years, businesses have been able to turn to friends, neighbors, and people halfway across the world to fund their businesses. It sounds like easy money, but it's much more complicated than that. And that's what our panelists will explore today. How likely is the average campaign to get some of those billions of dollars? How do campaigns in Columbus fare? Kickstarter reports that the platform has a success rate of about 36%. The Metropreneur looked at its own sample of business-based and business-related campaigns over the last 2 years. The campaigns analyzed in 2014 had a 52% success rate. In 2015, that number dropped to 32%. 2014 saw some huge victories for Columbus-based campaigns. Before Metropreneur started its monthly roundups in May, Trident Design's first campaign, The Quick Key, amassed over $228,000. In the latter half of the year, another Trident product earned just over $400,000. Content Via worked on a campaign that received over $233,000, and 5 more campaigns made it to the $40,000 to $60,000 range. In total, backers pledged $1.1 million to 2014's successful Roundup-worthy campaigns. In 2015, the highest-grossing successful campaign raised just over $71,000, another Trident Design winner, and in total, funding campaigns grossed about $489,000. That's less than half the amount compared to 2014, and the total from 2014 only presented a partial year. Has crowdfunding in Columbus already seen its boom and bust? Before you are 3 successful campaigners ready to share their thoughts. So first, can each of you tell us a little bit about the crowdfunding campaigns you've worked on? Ryan.
Sure. So I got my start with crowdfunding in 2012, funded a small coffee tricycle business for Solar Cafe. We raised $1,800, and fast forward 2 years, as I was trying to leave corporate, crowdfunding was the catalyst that allowed me to do that, because there wasn't a lot of other marketers who had crowdfunding experience and were out there helping campaigners. And then crowdfunding became a big part of our business at Content Via, but over the 2 years since we've been in existence, crowdfunding has become a much smaller part of our business, both because of growth, but also through a diversification and just fewer opportunities for crowdfunding.
Kate?
I've only run one Kickstarter, and it was for my own business, and we raised $47,000. And I continue to help other small startups, typically in the food sector, just in an advisory capacity.
Chris?
So my company, Trident Design, is a product development firm. So traditionally, our business was like making products. People would hire us to develop their own inventions, and then they would figure out how to bring them to market, or we would develop our own things and bring them to market ourselves. So I got started as an inventor myself, and had just been building this business based on figuring out how to bring products to market the old-fashioned way. And as crowdfunding sort of appeared on the scene, it became very interesting to me, so we decided to give it a shot with the Quick Key. I got a couple here. It's a little key-shaped multi-tool. It's the size and shape of a key. It's got a bottle opener and a few other functions. We just put it up on crowdfunding on Indiegogo to give it a shot because people were asking us questions about it, and it became a bit of a viral sensation. And as Susan said, it ended up raising over $200,000. Our goal was, I think, 15. And we were like, whoa, that's not what we were expecting. And so we were like, man, there's gold in those hills. So we decided we were going to like run more campaigns, and we started offering it as a service as well. So we did the carbon flyer she mentioned. It raised over $400,000. It's a carbon fiber airplane you control with your phone. And then we also ended up designing a product for another inventor called the Coolest Cooler, which raised $13 million on Kickstarter. And so it just ended up being a part of some really exciting campaigns, either on the product design side or campaign running side, and it's something we're still continuing to do aggressively, and it's grown to about 50% of our business now.
Great. So crowdfunding has a pretty low barrier to entry. The basic requirements for a platform like Kickstarter are that the entity is clearly and honestly represented, and it's something that can be shared with others. So whoever wants to tackle this one, how has the ease of accessibility and the rise in popularity of crowdfunding changed the game? Is this hurting legitimate and well-executed campaigns?
I think what it's doing is it's creating a very cluttered marketplace with a lot of crowdfunding campaigns, and you can go on there and you can see a sea of failures. I think because of the amount of competition in crowdfunding for the eyeballs, it's increasingly becoming a professional sport, where as an amateur, it's going to be harder and harder for you to get your own project off the ground because there are so many things you need to consider.
Yeah, I agree that the barrier to entry is low to get a campaign up. The barrier to entry to have a successful campaign is not low. Anymore, you got to have professionally produced video, not too slick. It doesn't want to look like a TV commercial. It wants to have an authentic look. But these are not low-cost garage videos anymore. And the potato salad phenomenon, which is amazing and beautiful, and couldn't have happened to an awesomer guy, but is like you don't see a lot of that occurring anymore. This isn't the early days of crowdfunding. We're kind of in our teenage years, and so there's some growing pains. And in order to succeed, it takes a serious, dedicated, professional effort that also requires a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources. I mean, on a campaign we run today, typically 300 to 400 man-hours to run the campaign from soup to nuts. So the barrier to entry is low. Like anyone can just throw up a campaign, but most of those campaigns just do nothing, and then 5 days into it, they're still at $0, and people are like, well, why isn't it making any money? And can you help me? And the answer is no, because your fate was sealed the day you launched your campaign, which is one of the keys to successful campaigns, is knowing that your fate is more or less sealed the day you launch your campaign. Like the work you did leading up to that is going to determine your success, and then what you do during the campaign is much less important overall than what you did in preparation.
And we'll touch more on that time part in a little bit, but you mentioned like a professional video. So what makes a good crowdfunding campaign, or is that something that can be defined?
I think having a story that people actually connect with. So I would say that I tend to operate in the food service world, and so for there, it's not going to have a national focus. You need to really be able to tell a story that people care about and find a way to build your community around that. I think it's a little different when you're building an actual product that can be sold. But
even with
how you tell your story, it's the video, it's the story, it's explaining with some transparency what the money is for and why people should invest in this instead of just waiting until you exist and can buy it that way, or.
And even with a product where people might want to buy it, even though they don't know you, just because a lot of the crowdfunding campaigns that people run are primarily funded by friends and family, initially, your own personal network. And so really what it takes, first and foremost, to succeed is a willingness and ability to activate your personal network. And even if you're doing a product that the masses might want, in order to attract their attention, you have to build momentum by activating your own personal network.
Well, speaking of products, looking at the Metropreneurs data, we found that in 2015, the Columbus campaigns tied to product launches saw a 54% success rate. So Ryan and Chris, can you kind of tell us about why product launches tend to see more success on crowdfunding platforms?
Well, I think crowdfunding is really ideal for physical products. And in having a variety of different products we've launched, the products that are very sexy, desirable, you can't go to a store and get them, and they've never been seen before, those are the types of things that get people to really put their dollars out there. You should really consider crowdfunding to be a pre-order sales channel more than somebody just giving you money for your business or your idea. You got to consider the cost of what you're doing. You're not going to get a premium when selling a product through crowdfunding. You're actually going to have to give a discount. So you need to consider that.
Yeah, and I think the non-product crowdfunding campaigns, unless it's a cause campaign, but most of the non-product campaigns are going to be almost exclusively backed by people who know you and are backing because they love you, or someone you love convinced them to do it. And so really it comes down to like the smaller campaigns that are for your personal life, or like a local restaurant is going to be purely network based. The reason why the product campaigns go bigger is because people who don't know you might want the product. So if they see value in your product, like, oh, that looks handy to me, I want that. And I don't even care who came up with it or where it's coming from. I just want what the product does. So that's why the product campaigns generally have more potential to go viral and spread around to people you don't know.
And to address your last point, what makes a great campaign is what you do before the campaign ever launches, and you really have to build up the momentum. And so it may look like a campaign out of nowhere gained all this momentum and went viral, but it's really about the work they did ahead of the campaign. I always use the example of the Scully's motorcycle helmet. It was this really awesome motorcycle helmet that had a camera in the back and a heads-up display, and they raised $1 million in a few hours, and everybody looked at it like, wow, how did they do this? Everybody must have really wanted it. Well, the secret sauce of it was they had 500,000 Harley-Davidson members in a database ahead of time, and they were able to leverage that to get interest before the campaign, and when they turned it on, they got the money like that. And so there's always something behind those viral successes. It doesn't just happen, and so you can't think that you're going to just put it out there and see how it goes. If you take that approach, it's very likely that you'll fail, and then coming back from a failed crowdfunding campaign is very difficult.
Yeah, and
Well, Kate, of the successful campaigns, 30% had some tie to food, which is one of the higher numbers. What is it about food and food-based campaigns that speak to people?
Well, people go into food service or they start a food business because of passion and they want to feed people. And none of that speaks to investors, banks, the proverbial rich uncle. And so trying to find this alternative pathway to make that accessible. Kickstarters and Indiegogos for food service are either to help kind of scale up or address a short-term problem, like a generator broke on a food truck and they can't go out to service without that being repaired, or they're large, we need to buy a food truck, or we need to build a kitchen. There's a really slow payback schedule on those sorts of things. This might be the only opportunity or the quickest way to get food into the mouths of the people who want to eat it quicker.
Great. So everyone has kind of been mentioning time. So Let's talk about that. So each of you give me a one-sentence reaction to the phrase, build it and they will come. Go on, down the line.
I think that's engineering-driven innovation in pursuit of a problem. And if you don't know who your customer is, you'll never find them.
Kate?
If the first time someone is going to eat a bite of your food or try your product or know about it is as soon as you have a successful campaign, then I don't think that is going to work so well. I don't know about products, sorry.
Yeah, well, with products, we call it, it's building a rocket, and when you hit the launch button, like all the work you did before you built it is what's going to cause it to achieve escape velocity or blow up on the launch pad. And so if you build it thinking that you don't need to do all that pre-work in terms of marketing, so the build it and you will come implies that people are going to see it and they're going to be so excited about it that everyone's going to just come and see it. But how are they going to see it? Like, you got to create some initial exposure to do it, and that's really the work of the crowdfunding campaign. The hard work of it is getting the eyeballs there, because without eyeballs, you don't get sales.
That's actually the next question. So tell me about the time you guys spend preparing for a crowdfunding campaign. How many hours goes into that?
Ours is in the hundreds. When somebody approaches us about a crowdfunding campaign, it's a minimum of 60 days of preparation, and that's notwithstanding what they have to be doing with product development. And so we have some requirements as far as, we need to see a working prototype. They need to understand their manufacturing costs. They need to know how long it's going to take to manufacture, and they need to know their shipping costs. So it's, at least 60 days beforehand before somebody could be ready.
So then what about while it's up? How much time are you spending on a campaign when it's running?
Well, it depends in part on how it's going. So, like, if the campaign is flopping, it quickly stops taking much time because there's not much you can do. If the campaign is going well and you're getting hundreds or thousands of backers, there's going to be lots and lots of questions and comments that you're going to want to react to and answer those questions. And there's going to be action on your social media pages where you're going to want to show up as though you're paying attention. And then it can be, easily a full-time job while the campaign is running. So if the campaign's going well, figure it's at least 40 hours a week. I mean, and it'll take everything you're willing to give it.
I don't know that I had the same experience. I clearly wasn't doing this as my profession. So I read all the articles that told me what you needed to do. I did all of the prep that I thought I needed to do, and we hit launch, and it was well received. But as soon as we got through my immediate network, it kind of stalled. And I think my family can attest to it that I don't think that I stopped working on it, and I don't think I slept until it was successful. I think that it was a very intense window of time. I stopped twitching recently when I.
Well, I think that's exactly what it takes. It requires unrelenting dedication to it, and so there's really not a maximum number of hours you're going to put in. You need to put in everything you have.
Well, it's interesting. Those articles are really geared towards what's been successful already, but if you're going to have a product that's successful on Kickstarter, there's not, or I guess that's the one I know, so that's my default, but there can't have been something like you already. So those articles they're a small little flashlight on the roadmap that you need to be following, so. You're making it up as you go along.
Yeah, it's intense, though. It's not something you can do casually, and it's not something you can do, with a half effort. The only effort that's worth expending is the 100% effort, because anything less than that is not going to work. So if you're going to cut any corners, then cut all of them, because don't bother doing it, because you're just setting yourself up to lose. So save all the time and effort of that 50% effort and do nothing, or go in all the way and, do whatever it takes.
All right, so now obviously reason for crowdfunding is money, so let's talk about that. Kickstarter data shows that most successfully funded projects raise less than $10,000, and Columbus's 2015 average was about $16,000. Ryan, you've said before that you go for strategically small campaigns. Can you explain what that is and what it means?
Sure. So when we talk about strategically small campaigns, we mean, that can be relative to the size of the business, but it means not necessarily going after every potential dollar. One of the challenges with crowdfunding is there's a reverse economy of scale. As you raise more and more money, it costs you more dollars to get that next customer. And so if you keep raising infinitely, you're going to get to a point where you're losing money to acquire more customers. And the crowdfunding market doesn't necessarily mirror the market that you're going to get when you're selling your product. So to think that capturing more and more customers during your crowdfunding campaign is a good thing may not necessarily be accurate. If you're trying to accomplish something for your investors or to have something to brag about, a big dollar amount surely does that, but I think it's more important to look at the bottom line profitability of the campaign. And since we consider it to be an expense, not a profit, you want to consider how little can you do to achieve all of your goals versus trying to raise everything possible, knowing you've got to give almost 10% to the crowdfunding platform when it's done.
And what a lot of people don't realize, especially on some of the bigger campaigns, is, to Ryan's point, they got there not organically, not virally, but because people were spending big money on pay-per-click ads, typically through Facebook. And so you might see a campaign that did $2 or $3 million, and I know people who run those campaigns, like I know the guys who did the Scully campaign, and a tremendous amount of money was spent on Facebook ads, and they were able to drive efficient ad spends. So they were, if they spend $1, you get $2 back, then spend $1 million. But as you spend more money, the cost per acquisition goes up. So the way those campaigns are created so largely is not organic. They muscled it. And it's easy to see a campaign that did multiple millions of dollars in revenue that lost money. And so I'd actually challenge the idea. The perception is that crowdfunding is about money. At the end of the day, what it's really about is about exposure, momentum, and market validation, more so than it is about the money you get, because you're really hoping for a break-even campaign. You're hoping that the campaign pays for itself. It's a self-funded market study and validation exercise that normally you might spend $50,000 and it's just $50,000 out to get that information. Here you're spending $50,000 and maybe you get $50,000 back, plus all the benefits that you got from doing it this way, an email list, a budding social network around your product, and the exposure, maybe some PR, and a lot of assets that you built to run that campaign that you were going to have to build anyway to market your product. So there's all these other benefits that you get from running the campaign that aren't the money, and the money is just like a nice, return on your investment, like the credit card gives you 3% back. So.
I know, it never occurred to me that people would have thought this was a thing to do for profit.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
So they're like, I'm going to be rich.
And we talked briefly about, we're talking about the money that it costs to run this and the expectations on the other end, and we talked about the time it takes to run the campaign, but we never mentioned how much time and energy is spent after a campaign is over. My campaign was over 18 months ago, and I still think I probably spend 2 to 3 hours a week on it. Just because people have an expectation. They bought into an idea or a business, and they have an expectation. It's like having 351 shareholders that now want you to report to them. It's exhausting.
And how do you try to manage those expectations?
You can't really.
There isn't. I think you end up, there will be people who love you, and there will be people who will be disappointed that you don't treat them with more reverence all the time.
Your crowdfunding supporters are special, and you need to treat them that way. They expect to be communicated with differently. You need to communicate with them frequently. You need to be transparent with them. When things don't go as planned, and they absolutely will, these are the people that you should be telling first, because they will turn on you so fast.
Publicly.
Absolutely. They can be some of the most vicious, Reddit-esque people, and they do very much view themselves as investors, and they play.
Wouldn't exist without me.
And you know what? That may be true in a lot of cases, and I think you want to treat those people special. Give them insight into what you're doing for your business, because if you treat them right, they will tell the world about you, and that's ultimately what you want.
Yeah, this is definitely less about the money and more their benefits outside of a successful campaign are untold. They could be told, but they're untold.
Well, they're definitely overlooked. People think it's about money, and that's not really the.
Well, obviously there's a lot of benefits besides money, but kind of how do you set those campaign goals where you need a certain amount to even move forward at all? So kind of what's that balancing point?
Well, I'd say there's several angles to look at it, and there's a whole art and science both to setting your goal. But if you set your goal too high, then you don't show momentum easily enough by like, oh, we've gotten 50% of our goal. If you set your goal at $100,000, it's going to be hard to show momentum, so people show up and they don't back the campaign. If you set the campaign so low that it's easy to hit your goal, but then you just creep across the goal and you don't actually have enough money to deliver on your campaign promises, now you're in a pickle. And you see that all the time where people don't have enough money, especially what happens is they under-calculated how much everything was going to cost to execute on the other end, shipping costs.
This is
and
like that wood watch where they were going to handcraft the wood watches, and they had this expectation that they would sell like 50 wood band watches, and then it like hit the millions, right? And there was no way they could handcraft all those watches.
And that's a great question
anymore.
is, maybe Chris or Ryan, what happens when you've set up your supply chain for 100 units and you end up selling 1,000, like the Coolest Cooler kind of ran into some issues like that. How does that change things? What happens then?
Well, this goes back to what Ryan was saying earlier, how the bigger your success, actually the less profitable it becomes and the more problematic it becomes, because now you're dealing with thousands of things or tens of thousands of things, and what worked at a small scale doesn't necessarily work at a big scale. Like when we launched our Quick Key product, we had tooling quotes and factories like gearing up to produce it, and our goal was 15,000. We thought we'd sell, about that. And the manufacturing method that we chose is very slow. It's investment casting. It's a slow, archaic kind of method, but it was low cost. And then we had to rethink when we sold 65,000 keys, we had to refigure everything. That took some time. It created some delays, and then the backers started, getting upset, and it just became a whole complicated thing because of the scale of the success. And so it's like a curse in disguise, I guess you could call it. If you have a hugely successful campaign, it's not necessarily to your huge benefit, or you got to be very careful how you navigate that. And if you're planning a campaign, you get to put some thought in advance to what happens if it goes big. But you don't want to spend too much energy there, because if it doesn't, you don't want to have wasted it. So there's just a lot of business decisions to be made in running a campaign, and people a lot of times come at it casually at first. But if you're going to ultimately be successful in it, you really need to understand what you're getting into and plan for the various possibilities.
You make it sound like it's a master's program for like getting an MBA. Like you're going to be great at every kind of press release and PR and negative responding and marketing, and yeah, it's time intensive.
It is, and at the end of the day, it's not that you need an MBA, but you just need to be prepared to take on each of those different activities at the best level you can achieve based on your own skills and the people you can enroll in supporting you. Either enroll them by paying them or enroll them by like, hey, help a buddy out. And I think a lot of the smaller campaigns are like done with a group of friends who can pull together all the skills to do it. And then the bigger campaigns are usually run by companies who are throwing a lot of resources at it, even if it appears that it's, a father and son working out of their garage. That's just a very carefully calculated marketing angle.
Well, and we've talked about momentum some, and I know, Ryan, you kind of have a formula for how a campaign should progress once it's launched, and, that's a good predictor for if you're going to meet your goal. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is why choosing the goal amount is really important. You need to get to about 30% of your goal within the first 3 days. That'll kind of trigger the algorithm that you're making progress. You've got to be close to 100% by 10 days or so. If you're lagging behind that, you have to put more resources in to accelerate, and it's like pushing a boulder up a hill. Every day it gets steeper and steeper, and if you haven't reached that goal, it's going to be harder for you to get anyone's attention. The faster you can hit the goal, that's why sometimes it's better to do a smaller goal amount, have maybe an internal goal that's set much higher, but set the listed public goal a little lower than you want, and then raise a multiple of that goal. That way you can trigger the algorithm. All of the crowdfunding sites run on a search algorithm that determines which campaigns get listed at the top, and that's where working with an agency can really help you, because we've seen enough of the campaigns to know what triggers those algorithms.
30% in the first 3 days sounds dreamy.
I was going to say, judging by your reaction, that was not your experience.
No, I remember week 2 where the number went down. It did not go up. And just the panic, the sheer panic and hustle that happened right when I saw that.
So what did you do after that to kind of help build momentum and eventually get to the goal?
My story changed. I realized what people were connecting with. I was trying to build this community that really wanted an idea, and I needed them to know how we used it. So I retooled the way we did our rewards more to show how we would be able to use this space I was asking people to buy into. But also changing the way we told our story. Instead of asking people for money, the story definitely became, if you know someone who needs this space, tell them about us. And the more we were able to do that, then I stopped recognizing the names on the people who were supporting the campaign, and that's when I could start eating food again.
Always a plus. All right, now we're going to switch it up and we're going to have the lightning round. So I want each of you to just kind of give me one sentence response to each of these. So first of all, what is the biggest misconception when it comes to crowdfunding? Ryan?
That people will find you when you turn your campaign on.
Kate?
That you will make money.
And Chris?
Yeah, both of those, and, to add another one, and that it's only for small companies or individuals, because now corporations are getting into it in a big way.
All right, what's the biggest disadvantage?
Unrealistic expectations from your backers.
I think it's harder to get people to care about crowdfunding now because of all the noise.
Yeah, everyone's been bombarded by, many GoFundMe,
Or they've been burned.
and they've been
Yeah.
burned. Biggest disadvantage, again, those are like number one and number two. Number three is possibility of a public failure. It's not, or a public success that you failed to deliver on. So like back in the day, people fail and no one knew except their investors. Now, like the whole world knows you failed and you get to deal with, backlash from TechCrunch or whatever, so.
The last thing you want to be is the fable that they just keep bringing up, that one thing that failed.
Don't
All
be
right.
that guy.
Now for the good one, what's the biggest advantage? If there is one, no.
No, there's not.
Press.
I opened my doors with a solid community that wanted us to succeed.
Market validation. My favorite way to leverage a successful crowdfunding campaign is to then license the product to an existing manufacturer. So you don't have to start a company, you can then, but now you've got this proof that someone at least will spend money on the idea, and so it gives you a tremendous amount of leverage in a negotiation around a license.
Great. In a few minutes, we'll move to audience questions. But just have a final kind of question to sum everything up. So Chris and Ryan, you've been involved in multiple campaigns over the last few years, and Kate, a lot of businesses at the commissary do campaigns now. Have you guys noticed any shift in the industry, and kind of where do you think things are headed?
Yeah, huge shift in the industry. I mean, first of all, it's like the early days of the internet. It was, researchers, and it was kind of subculture type of thing, and then pretty soon it got taken over by commerce and big companies. And you're seeing that same thing happen in crowdfunding now, where it's no longer just for the little guy, though it's still a safe place, and it's a great place for that to happen, but more and more it's being taken over by larger professional organizations, and that trend will continue because, the people at those companies, they're not dumb. They see the money flying around, they want some of it.
I think that a lot of small businesses a lot of small food businesses are trying this, and I think the only ones that we'll see being really successful are existing businesses trying to scale up or solve a problem. So they'll already have their market they can reach to.
I predict we're going to see more industry regulation because of the amount of crowdfunding campaigns and because a lot of people have been burned. There's a really short window to clean up the crowdfunding industry, or else it's going to turn a lot of people off. So I envision something almost like Consumer Reports, where it's tracking crowdfundings from inception through delivery to see how they're performing. I think it's a necessity for crowdfunding to continue to be vibrant.
We were just talking before this started about the new crowdfunding level where you're able to have equity and how that would change the industry just a little bit too. But there's a lot that has to happen before that starts.
Well, that actually is a good question, is, kind of what's equity going to mean for crowdfunding?
It ties into what he said, there's going to be a lot more tracking.
I think it's only going to be a good thing because it allows individuals who might have wanted to support you as a product to be able to also put their dollars and then get something in return. As long as it's managed and regulated properly, I think crowdfunding for equity could be absolutely awesome for startups.
Yeah, and I think you'll see that also continue to drive the trend of more and more professional campaigns. People are asking for big money. They're not going to be, the real rough homespun campaigns are going to have less and less opportunity as opposed to professionally executed high production value campaigns.
Great. So I think we're going to turn to audience questions. It's CMC's tradition to take audience questions. If you have a question, please state your name, ask your question, and we thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments. Let's proceed.
Yes, hi. Happy to ask the first question here. Thank you. Andy Campbell. Your discussion today seems product specific, and I'm wondering opportunities for our friends like at WCBE, WOSU, or even the Metropolitan Club. Is there an opportunity for nonprofits to participate in this space, and what would that look like if it's not product centered?
Well, it's not a nonprofit, but actually we supported and coached 1025 on their campaign last year, where they raised over $200,000 to help them with the leasing costs of their antenna. So that was a cause-based for-profit business, but that the community feels passionate about supporting because of the role it plays in the community and in the music industry here in town. So absolutely, there's a space there, and also a lot of people a lot of nonprofits use the platforms, various platforms like CrowdTilt, or I guess it's just Tilt Now, and Patreon, and there's other platforms that are specifically geared towards nonprofit activities. And causes are one of the other types of campaigns that see relatively large numbers. Product and causes are the two big ones.
I think the reason to go to crowdfunding for a nonprofit would have to be less about just the general overall story, but a very specific point. So we saw that. I know, again, it's buying the antenna leasing rights, but having one specific story, just one component that you're trying to get people to buy into that project. One thing you mentioned with listing the alternative websites is the less it's Kickstarter, the more you have to explain what you're talking about. And when it's Kickstarter, you will be surprised how much you still have to teach people what that is and how to use it. So I don't know how viable that is for telling the big story of a nonprofit.
Great. Next question.
I thought there was another microphone. Hi, I'm Wendy Bortz. I have a question. If you're working with someone like Kickstarter, I know I have a daughter who just browses the technology stuff, who's an engineer. If you hit your 30%, it sounds like you have to bring people in first, but if you do hit a point where you're showing up in the search engines, is there a certain demographic that you're going to reach through that audience? Does anybody know anything about people that are naturally on Kickstarter or something like that?
Well, it skews early adopter. Demographics and age-wise, it's very broad, but definitely skews for an early adopter type mindset. Your product will very much determine who your customer and your market is. But the people on crowdfunding are very diverse, and people who've supported the campaigns I've been involved with are all across the board, but they're all interested in getting something first. And so that's the type of person you're going to get.
And the campaigns that have tended to go the biggest have been gadgets that appeal to guys, like younger male gadgets, the really big campaigns. Not overall. The overall scene is extremely diverse.
In the food campaign world, it's predominantly women.
Yeah, so.
Great. Next question.
Hello, my name is John McKnight, and I work at Rife's Auto Body, which is next to the commissary. So wanted to thank Kate for being a wonderful neighbor. Really appreciate having you guys next to us there. It's kind of neat. Okay. Score. All right. If I wanted to give money, not to raise money, but I want to give money to a crowdfunding source, why do I want to do that? What's in it for me? I'm not getting a stake in the ownership of the business. I'm not getting any stock options or any return on my investment. Why do I want to do it?
How awesome is it to be the person who believed in the brewery before the brewery opened or helped make something happen? Being an entrepreneur is a really, really scary thing, and it scares a lot of people off, but this is an opportunity for those people to kind of help others live that dream in a relatively safe way with a whole bunch of your friends.
Crowdfunding is the democratization not only of raising capital, but it's the democratization of what gets to exist. So people are crowdfunding things that don't exist already. It's an opportunity to vote on what gets to be made real. And so you might have a smaller budget for how much you want to invest in that way than what you're investing in, making a return. But in the case of products as well, you're typically getting a sample of the product, and as Ryan referenced earlier, at a deep discount off of eventual retail, like typically 40 to 50% for like the earliest backers. You'll get like 40 to 50% off retail. So you're going to get a discount to be the first to have the thing and have supported it coming into being. Bragging rights.
Thank you.
Bragging rights. The t-shirt.
Hi, my name's Edward McGinnis. I'm currently running a startup called dinnerup.com. We're a social network meets the dinner hour, and I'm looking to start a crowdfunding campaign to fund a pilot program. And I'm trying to get an idea. You guys talked a little bit about the preload on the beginning. Is there any kind of correlation between like how many emails lists you have to the amount of money you're trying to pull in? I'd like to know a little bit more about the lead-in.
Building my rewards, I actually looked to the nonprofit world at their donation pyramid. So finding that I needed to have a lot of people invest at a lower level, and how many eyes needed to see that lower level to commit to that, all the way up to the top of the pyramid, which is the big prize with like 2 to 3 donors. And I really developed my reward tree my reward pyramid based off of that. I don't know how to translate how many on an email list you need for that, but your rewards, you should try and figure out who you're targeting for each level before that campaign starts.
Yeah, and like a typical email list, if you have a targeted email list, but that's not friends and family, just from the public that you get through like a landing page where you attract interest, will convert on average 1% to 2%. So if you have a 100 email list, and you send it out to 100 people, you'll get 1 or 2 sales, generally speaking. Now, if you have a highly targeted list of people who are very interested in what you have to offer and they know you, Edward, then you might get a 20 to 30% conversion rate. So it's highly list dependent, but you can make some assumptions. If I've got 500 emails and I think because these are all my friends and family, it's going to convert at 10%, that means 50 sales, and 50 sales at an average of $100 is $5,000. So you can do some quick napkin math and kind of figure out what you'll get at different levels of conversion rate off your email list, and then you can back that up into how much does it costs to get an email based on Facebook ads, and you can reverse engineer an ad budget if you're using pay-per-click ads to generate your email list.
I want to go on just a tiny little tangent off of what he said. Like, if you're counting on your friends and family to back your Kickstarter and make it successful, then you might not have very many friends at the other end.
All right, thank you.
Let's take the next question.
Hello. I'm Ann Nelson, actually a guest today. Was part of this at the beginning, the Metropolitan Club. And I'm here as a member of the League of Women Voters here in Columbus. We're 95 years old, so we're not kickstarting anything. We did that 95 years ago. But my question, let me ask a question in this room. How many of you have used our voter information bulletin when you go to the polls to vote? Okay. Because that's the product that we put out to the community, other than all that we do to promote.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question?
My question is, would we be an appropriate not-for-profit to have a Kickstarter to fund that publication because the Dispatch used to, and we can't get an obligation from them?
Are you currently funded primarily by donations to do this anyway?
Absolutely, 100%.
I would maybe discourage it only for unless you thought you could get donations outside of the Columbus market. I would discourage it because you'd have to give a percentage to the crowdfunding platform, and that would take away from what you're going to need to run your program. And so I may consider something else like a Tilt campaign where you're able to run it on your own site for a lower percentage in fees. That may allow you to do a crowdfunding-like campaign, garner crowd support, but keep more at the end.
Also, I don't know how you would do that with the rewards. If it's a thing that you give away, I'm not sure what your reward level would be, what you're giving people, which has a cost associated with it in exchange for that money.
Okay, and the Tilt, who can tell me about that?
Well, if it tilts, it's basically crowdfunding. It's just private crowdfunding. It's not on one of the public platforms where there's a bunch of people coming just to tour around and see what they see. So 100% of the people who show up there are people you drive there, either through ads or emails. Now, as the League of Women Voters, potentially you have a large email list. And so if you have a large email list, that's by far the most valuable marketing tool that you can have. You can set up a campaign using something like Tilt and then use the email list to drive people, say, hey, we're doing a fund drive. And then what that does is it provides a platform for collecting money. So if you don't have a platform for collecting money, people are just like mailing in checks. It's kind of awkward. Here they've got a centralized place where they can go to a website and donate $10 or $50 or something.
Thank
like
you.
that.
I knew there was a reason I came to this luncheon. Thank you so much.
Great. These are going to be our last two questions.
Hello, I'm David Hanselman at Ohio State University, and I'd like to go back to the first question about nonprofits and look at it from the broader societal point of view. I'm thinking that the increase in crowdfunding is likely to further blur the lines between for-profit and nonprofit organizations, especially with the support from millennials who, when they spend money, want to make sure that expenditure is also doing something good for the environment or their community. And then think about Mark Zuckerberg and his wife and how they set up their $1 billion not in a traditional foundation type setting. So to the extent, do you agree with this trend and where it may lead? And is it good for our society and our economy? Or does it threaten things like traditional foundations may have to adapt to different ways of doing business?
I think social entrepreneurship goes far beyond crowdfunding, and I think it's an incredible thing for innovation. The idea that you can do good and make money at the same time, and those don't have to be mutually exclusive. You know, I think for an entrepreneur, being able to publicly state that I'm going to take a portion of my proceeds and do something good with it, that's also very appealing in crowdfunding. There was a campaign that Shock Top, the beer company, did where they raised money through crowdfunding to create these rubber bricks that you could put in your toilet to reduce water usage. And so it's the idea of we're going to raise some funds to be able to do some good at the same time, and what they got out of it was a lot of brand recognition.
I think we're going to get burned before we get to that point. There's no reporting mechanism for a for-profit business to disclose how much or to actually give the check to the profit. It's a lot like menus that say that they buy, it's farm-to-table restaurant, but they haven't ordered anything from the farm that's written on their chalkboard for years. So,
And I think to your question about will it threaten existing foundation-type entities, sure. I mean, it'll change the way people have to adapt in every aspect of life all the time. People need to adapt. The world changes, things change. This is definitely a change agent in terms of freeing up capital. Overall, it's releasing capital that's been tied up. Like if it's matching venture capital, it's not taking away, it's adding an additional $30 billion that are being taken out of people's, pocket change and reinvested in creating new entrepreneurial or social entrepreneurial activities. So overall, it's going to be a huge benefit to generating startups and generating social enterprises in our society, perhaps at the cost of some of the old guard.
Great. We'll take our last question.
Hi, my name is Jeff Travaro, and you talked about equity becoming part of the crowdfunding platform going forward. What has to happen for that to move forward?
It just passed through government regulation, so it's been approved, but A reporting mechanism has to be built, kind of like, a website had to be built for our healthcare. There's a limit to how much an accredited investor and an unaccredited investor can invest across all platforms. So there has to be a way to track how much people are donating to the different campaigns and through traditional investment routes. So once that's built, then you'll see an explosion of.
Yeah, well, there's the Jobs Act approved the equity crowdfunding, and there's actually equity crowdfunding now at a certain level. It's like Schedule 1, and there's like the lower level that's a lower barrier to entry is where they're still working out some of the mechanisms. But this is happening here in the near future. So it's not immediate, but in the very near future, you'll see that happening. And people like Indiegogo are looking into it, but there are a lot of other companies as well who are, developing these software platforms. So as soon as it's possible, you're going to see a lot of it simultaneously as soon as the laws are finalize the rules and regulations.
Yeah, there's a number of platforms right now that are out for equity crowdfunding, but they're basically just advertising for your investment round. And so in the next few months, when unaccredited investors can actually donate or invest in startups, I think that's where we're going to see a lot more action. But right now, it just hasn't happened, even though the Jobs Act has been in effect for 3 years or so.
All right.
Those websites.
I hope you enjoyed today's forum. Let's give this panel again a round of applause. We want to thank our partners, Next Level Columbus, along with our speakers, Kate Jupe, Ryan McManus, Chris Hawker, and Susan Post for being here. We're going to invite you to visit the wall where there's coffee and cookies. You can stick around and continue to chat about the topic. Feel free to make sure you always watch our forums and replay them on WOSU, through PBS affiliates throughout the state, through Columbus Television, and through the CMC YouTube channel. Thank you all so much for being here. And remember, if you are new to us, drop your business card off at the desk on the way out. We'd love to stay connected with you. We'll see you next week.